Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. My home thoughts return to Thomas Pynchon. What goes around may come around, but it never ends up exactly the same place. You ever notice? Like a record on a turntable. I don't know how many people remember those. All it takes is one groove's difference, and the universe can be on into a whole nother song. Put up a photograph of Pemba from the sky, which I rather liked. And political reflections, I start with the Global Peace Index report 2014, shows a continuation of the 7-year trend for declining levels of peace globally. Since 2008, 51 countries have improved, while 111 countries have deteriorated in peace. The world has become 4% less peaceful since 2008. Europe remains the most peaceful region, with 14 of the top 20 most peaceful countries. Syria has replaced Afghanistan at the bottom of the index, with its Global Peace Index score falling 84% since 2008. The total economic impact of containing violence is estimated to be $9.46 trillion in 2012. And then obviously the world global average peace score deteriorated slightly since last year, mainly due to global increases in terrorist activity, the number of conflicts fought, and the number of refugees and displaced people. The 10 countries most likely to deteriorate in peace in the next 2 years are Zambia, Haiti, Argentina, Chad, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Nepal, Burundi, Georgia, Liberia, and Qatar. I don't know how happy Qatar will be about being included in that risk. And then they've got a global rankings list, which was quite interesting. Iceland was top, as in the most peaceful place. Botswana, 36. Zambia, 44. United Kingdom, 47. France, 48. Tanzania quite high up at 59, Ghana at 61, Gabon 68, Djibouti 74, Malawi 77, above a place like Saudi Arabia at 80, Mozambique 82, US 101, Angola 102, China 108, Uganda 110, Iran 131, Kenya 132, Rwanda 137, Ethiopia 139, and then Zimbabwe 148, Nigeria 151, DRC 155, CAR 156, Sudan 157, Somalia 158, that's all in the vicinity here, South Sudan 160, and I conclude by saying it's a much more dangerous world. Iraq's military said it repelled an attack by an Al-Qaeda breakaway group about 55 kilometers north of Baghdad, just to show you how close they are. Bloomberg is saying Obama's holding off on airstrikes as Iraq risks breakup. US is struggling to help keep Iraq from coming apart at the seams as the Obama administration signaled that airstrikes aren't imminent. National Security Council spokesman Bernadette Meehan and Pentagon spokesman Rear Admiral John Kirby each said last night that Obama hadn't yet made a decision about military options. One possibility being considered is a highly selective campaign of pinpoint strikes with drones or fighter jets against Sunni militants akin to US operations in Yemen. This is according to the New York Times. The president has been clear that this is not primarily a military challenge, Carney said. It is still very much an imperative that Iraq's political leaders take steps to become more united to govern in a non-sectarian manner. I think when you see some of these photographs, this image I found on Photo Booth posted by militants from the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Shebaab appears to show insurgents leading away captured Iraqi soldiers. It's very difficult to take a less sectarian approach when you're being confronted with one which is just chopping heads. I'll put up another photograph of mourners carrying the coffin of a victim killed by a suicide bomber during a funeral in Najaf on June 12th. And then an interesting story in the FT, Selling Terror, how ISIS details its brutality. I'll put up an image that is there. It says this is not a corporation, does not have shareholders, but the military success and brutality of the jihadi groups surging through Iraq have been recorded with a level of precision often reserved for company accounts. Since 2012, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant has issued annual reports outlining in numerical and geographical detail its operations, the number of bombings, assassinations, checkpoints, suicide missions, cities taken over, and even apostates converted to the ISIS cause. And it shows you that it's a business. War is surely a business. Premier's wife, to bring a touch of soft power, when Premier Lee Keqiang, who visited here as well, visits the United Kingdom and Greece this week. One of the most prominent members of his entourage will be his wife, Cheng Hong. Her presence on the trip suggests China is already reaping handsome rewards from her early forays and those of Peng Liyuan, the wife of President Xi Jinping, into soft diplomacy. Lee visited Europe twice last year without Cheng, but she was by his side when he visited Angola, Ethiopia, Kenya and Nigeria last month. Xi and Peng are regarded as an important political couple in Europe. It has been increasingly obvious that Chinese leaders are paying greater attention than before to the influence of soft diplomatic arrangements during official visits. I think Xi's wife Peng Liyuan is an important messenger of China's soft power. Islam said diplomatically the presence of Li and his wife will also be good for China's image. And I wrote about soft power in the context of Al Jazeera, but I think it applies to the Chinese push. Water is fluid, soft and yielding, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. As a rule, whatever is fluid, soft and yielding will overcome whatever is rigid and hard. This is another paradox. What is soft is strong. Lao Tzu. I like this photograph that President Hassan Rouhani posted on Twitter of him watching the Iran-Nigeria game at home in Tehran. Euro, dollar 135.47, dollar index 80.61, so barely changed. The yen is a little bit softer at 102.20, Swissy 0.8996. The pound below 170 at 169.64, but I think we're going to 173.50 and then higher. Aussie 0.9333, India rupee 60.18. South Korean won has backed down from some multi-year highs, was last trading at 10.23. The Rial 226.18, Egyptian pounds 7.1489, and the Rand has softened even more, 10.8480. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart, was still towards the top of the range, but we've been unable to break out of that range. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart, 135.47, trades with a lot of resilience. Gold, 1-year chart, 1267.95, and really, given the uncertainty levels that we've seen across the globe, geopolitical tensions, it should be trading better and higher, and therefore it informs me that it's actually pretty soft underneath. Crude oil, I'll put up a 5-day chart, but this could spike big at any moment, and there was some news that I saw a flash across that some oil facility had been struck, and I think if that starts to happen, you'll see that price jump very, very sharply and higher. The Bloomberg has written a story about L'Escargot, which is a very famous restaurant, of course, is the name for snails. I like this sentence, the snails are big, fat, and garlicky. That sounds tasty. Coming to Africa, the Israeli Foreign Affairs Minister Lieberman is leading a roadshow to Africa where Israeli exports total $1.4 billion. And I think I'll be seeing him this week. Avigdor Lieberman is leading a delegation of 50 Israeli executives to Africa this week. Israel's sub-Saharan African exports reached $1.4 billion in 2013, almost 4 times the total of $374 million a decade ago. Bloomberg said the push into Africa was to diversify from Israel's exports to Europe, its largest trading partner. The South African all shares up 10.063% and at a fresh record all-time closing high, and now heading towards 51,000. Dollar versus Rand, I'll put up a 6-month chart. That's lost a great deal of ground, caught me off guard. I think that's to do with the downgrading, but ultimately I think that was a backward-looking move by the ratings agency. We know that South Africa's been trundling along at the bottom. I think the next move will be a gradual, patchy, but gradual improvement. Egyptian pound just below 715. We've been here for about a week. Egyptian stock market fell 1.47% yesterday. It's up 23.798% this year. There's been a little bit of profit taking of late. The Nigerian all share fell 0.76%, and that is negative 0.4694% this year. Breaking news coming out of Nigeria was that at least 13 people have been killed and 20 severely injured in a bombing of soccer viewing venue in northeast Nigeria, which takes me back to Abu Bakr Sheka's comment. He's the leader of Boko Haram, who taunted President Goodluck Jonathan in April when he said, "I'm in your city," and I wrote, or is it a city? So I'll put up a photograph of him, and you can see from that photograph and his body language that he's a taunter. And it's a very curious sort of way of conducting oneself. Ghana's stock exchange, that's up 10.0699% this year, but the currency remains very weak, and you've lost about 10% when you factor that in. Brazil is opening up a new $2 billion credit line to Angola. Total figure now will mean the total credit is $7.83 billion, which makes it clear that there is a growing link between the two countries. The Brazilian construction group Odebrecht is Angola's largest private employer. Of course, the US opened a credit line to Angola worth $1 billion for the acquisition of railway and electrical equipment from the GE Group recently. In Zambia, the cap on lending rates rose to 28% from 21%, effective immediately, and clearly they are prepared to use the interest rate tool in order to defend the kwacha with more vigor. Central bank introduced the limits in December 2012 to spur economic growth and create jobs through lowering the cost of capital. Yields on Zambia's one-year treasury bills reached a record 19.99% at auction last week. Kwacha has lost 10% against the dollar this year, but has rallied sharply since we heard that the IMF would be visiting in September. Coming to Kenya, the Kenyan military says it, the African Union says it, even Al-Shebaab says it, but President Uhuru Kenyatta not only refuses to say it, he actively denies it. The government on Tuesday deployed paramilitaries to what it called flashpoints that could fall prey to an attack similar to that in Mpeketoni. Troops have been stationed not near Somalia, but in ethnic strongholds that support Mr. Odinga, including in western Kenya and Nairobi's largest slum. Isolated riots are already reported. If Al-Shebaab hoped its attacks on Kenya would destabilize the East African regional giant, it is at risk of succeeding in more ways than one. That's the FT. Reuters, Somali Islamist group not behind Kenya coast attacks. Kenya's president said on Tuesday that 2 days of attacks on the coast in which about 65 people were killed were planned by local political networks, dismissing claims by Somalia's Al-Shebaab Islamist group that it was behind the assaults. The attack in Lamu was well-planned, orchestrated and politically motivated ethnic violence against the Kenyan community. This, therefore, was not an Al-Shebaab terrorist attack. Evidence indicates local political networks were involved in the planning and the execution of the heinous crime. This also played into the opportunist network of other criminal gangs, he said. And in a live rebuttal during and after that press conference, HSM Press tweet, and they tweet it's the language and the humour which is very dark and surreal, frankly. This morning I saw he posted a tweet about, we're coming to America or something. It's kind of sinister. But they tend to live tweet in difficult situations and are quite often eminently more believable than the official line. In a live rebuttal after that press conference, the Al-Shebaab Twitter handle tweeted, "If the facts don't fit the theory, change the facts." The Jubilee has made a conscious decision to change the facts. And in an article in the New York Times, which is referring to the fact that the president is blaming domestic foes, not Shebaab, local political networks, not an Al-Shebaab terrorist attack, some analysts questioned whether Mr. Kenyatta's effort to shift the blame was part of a ploy to deflect attention from the government's failure to protect civilians from the spate of violence. Others saw the president's words as a reaction to mounting criticism by the main opposition party, which has forcefully rebuked the government for its apparent weakness in the face of attacks that many believe were orchestrated by the Shebaab, which is based in Somalia. Kwamchetsi Makoko, columnist for the Daily Nation, was skeptical of the president's statement. One has to give the president the benefit of the doubt. But there are huge inconsistencies in that narrative, he said in a telephone interview. It would be very worrying if political issues would be allowed to spill into security matters. It does not make sense. He has more explaining to do. Mr. Kenyatta said the police officers who had been unable to prevent this week's attacks had been suspended and would be immediately charged in court. "We are all hurting," he said. "Many of us are angry." And you'll remember on the 19th of May, I wrote, "We are being spun an epic poem, the bedtime story." I said then, disbelief can be suspended, of course, but essentially we reach a Marx Brothers in duck soup moment. Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? I'll put up a photograph of Kenyan police officers walking past a bonfire used to barricade a main road in Mpeketoni, Kenya on Tuesday. And then I'll tell you that, Kenya's 10-year bond yielded less than 7%, but this compares with 2.6% on US Treasuries, 1.35% on German Bunds, and 0.6% in Japan. De Klerk, quoted by Reuters, said security is a concern, but it's not a showstopper. Interesting. Kenya's $2 billion bond, of course, attracted more than $8 billion in orders. Frontier debt market returns of 9% this year, but it looks stretched now. Kenya's tourism industry faces renewed threat from Al-Shebaab. This is in the FT. And I took this quote, Simon Lenton, that's a 26-year-old vendor outside the nearby Reef Hotel, which I used to go. They had a gym there when I was in my teenage years, and I used to go there a lot, and I know it well. Tells of the day he found a bomb in a bag under a tree. A young guy left his bag before he went to swim, he explains. When he came back, he bought a Kenya bracelet from my stall, but he never came back for his bag. Realizing it was a bomb, he raised the alerted, but it exploded and blew the roof off a kite surf shed. No tourism here since that day, he adds. Then Katrina interviews David Grant, who's British, who refused to quit his £9,000 family vacation in nearby Diani. This is a holiday of a lifetime for us. It's paradise, he said. I'll put up a photograph of the seaside at Diani and another one from the other side of the Diani beach. The first one is from the right-hand side of the beach. The next is on from the left near Southern Palms. And the sea there can be so still. It's absolutely beautiful, and I can understand why he called it paradise. Diamond Trust Bank have been given permission to do their rights issue. They get basically one share for every 10 currently held, so it's a very light rights issue. It'll be fully subscribed. Diamond Trust Bank up 27.08% this year on a strong rally. and it's got further to go. It trades on a trailing PE of 11.291. Nakumatt has secured a 3 billion Kenya shilling loan from KCB for the ShopRite buyout that it's conducting right now in Tanzania. Kenya shilling is stronger at 87.60. We'll get stronger on the projected dollar inflows, but obviously we've got to keep an eye on the shilling, on the price of crude oil. Nairobi All Share up 8.92% in 2014 and has fallen 1.168% this week. NSE 20 is down 3.288% this year now and is at September 2013 lows. Obviously, the big headline event was that great raise of $2 billion, which really is a strong signal in the noise and a positive one. And I think Kenya did very well on that front. The stock market has been a little bit weak, as I've said. We've been on the downdraft, I think security concerns, but it looks a little bit oversold and overdue a rebound now. Safaricom unchanged at 12.85 yesterday, not far less than 2% of a record closing high achieved the previous month. Kenya Airways bounced 2.72% yesterday, and it's bouncing even more today. Very oversold. KCB, the bank's trading a little bit softer as a group, but they've had a great run. Equity Bank, obviously the leader, up 40.65% this year. EABL was sold off 3.83% yesterday. Arthur River was a big rebounder. Pynchon retreated 3.23% to close at 9. That made it down 33.57% this year and is falling sharply again. Once again, I do appreciate the fact that you take time out to stop here, and I hope I'm of some utility. Thank you so much.